Welcome folks to Manufactotum. Today I'm going to be making a welding table. I don't have a huge space, so I don't need a huge table. It's going to be about 1.5 meters by 1 meter, but I do intend to make it extendable at the sides and at the front. So I cleared some space, which took far longer than it should have, but my shop was an absolute mess, and that's partly reason why I need to fix my table situation to begin with. So I start the actual build here because I had originally put these slats on 2 lengths of angle iron, corner side up. Typically it's easier to get a good level if you're only settled on 2 points, but then I replaced the angle iron because it was a bit too finicky. Just trying to set those spacers between the slats was a pain in the balls, so I slid these smaller square tubes in their stead and went from there. Actually, that having been said, what I should have done was put the 2 angle irons perpendicular under those 2 square tubes. The reason any of this is necessary to begin with is that there's no part of my floor that is perfectly flat. It was only poured a few months ago, but I guess it's since settled all to shit, so keeping this whole thing level is key to making it flat, square, and true, all of which are paramount in a work surface. So you're gonna see me check that continuously throughout this project. And of course, as always, it still won't be perfect. So once I've got my frame parallel, squared, checked my diagonals, I use 3 centimeter cutoffs as spacers to keep the slats consistent and parallel all the way down. To avoid any accumulated error, it's usually a good idea to switch the left and right on each subsequent slat, otherwise you get to the end, it's off by 1 centimeter. So you can see me here actually making my first mistake. As I go down the line, I measure 5 centimeter overhang off the front of my, off what I think is the front of my table. It's why you don't see me too concerned about measuring the back overhang. I just accept that these pieces aren't exactly flush, but if the square tubes are parallel, they should be about the same front and back, bearing some variance in the cut, and if that cut goes to the back, that's fine. Now, the table is meant to have slats across the top, about 3/4 of the way across, and the last quarter, which you see empty here, will just be a metal sheet, possibly with a rotor wheel for tube welding, but that part goes on the right. And as you see, I'm welding the slats of these 2 square tubes, the 50 by 50s. So the table top is actually facing down. Basically, I'm building this upside down, so when I flip it, I can either reverse my front and back or reverse my left and right. As my left and right are where they should be, I'll be reversing the front and back. But this is something I'm gonna forget a few times before I actually finish. I may have actually re-switched my left and right here as I went back to fix one of the slats that I nudged. So I'm really rather concerned here with warpage, and I know that welding this table is going to warp the frame some, but I'm hoping it won't be too much, and there's ways to mitigate this by welding or heating on the reverse side, but I don't really want to deal with all that. I'm actually going to fix any variations later, as you'll see in part 2, but for now I'm just tacking everything in place. Once the table is quote-unquote complete-ish, it'll be slightly less susceptible to warpage, so I'll be welding most of this proper much later. So once the rails and the slats are together, I need to make the rest of the underframe. I've done it in a way that the two long pieces remain open for extendability out the sides, which means I also don't have to worry about miter joints and such. So these pieces just have to be, get fit between the parallels, and probably, I mean, honestly, I don't really need them, but it certainly adds stability and just looks better. It'd look weird without them, without a complete frame underneath. I'm just using these pieces to figure things out here. I haven't come to the legs quite yet. In fact, I think at this point I hadn't even decided on height yet. I just want to see where the welds need to go to be out of the way and be able to weld as much as possible before grinding what I need. It's always best to consider the order of operations essentially at each step for each operation. So, for example, I got these joints fully welded and then ground them off for the legs. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten to them quite so easily later on. Would have been in the way of welding the legs in. So to cut the legs to size, I had to consider the table height and then subtract the casters and whatever method I decide to attach the casters to the legs. And what I end up doing is using square cutoffs of the same 60 by 20s that I used for the tabletop slats. So that's an additional 2 centimeters to the casters. The casters are 13 centimeters, I believe. So 2 centimeters for the feet, that's 15. Take that from the desired height of 85 centimeters minus the top and frame, which together are 7 centimeters, gives me a leg length of 65 centimeters to cut. And that's what I'm doing here. So once the legs are cut, I have to make sure I attach them square to the top. Diagonals and squares are important, but one way to do this is with a spirit level. So if my tabletop is still level to the floor, the legs should be on a vertical level. So I check one side, check the other side, and I continue checking as I weld them. Also, these blue welding magnets are pretty good for keeping everything in place. They keep things kind of square. You shouldn't rely on any one of these methods, of course, but you'll see in a minute I actually had to readjust the tabletop to be level and readjust the legs to a new reference. So before everything is absolutely set, only tack welds, and most importantly, tack welds in the right spots to allow for adjustments in the right directions. Whether you need to bend it towards a corner, towards an edge, which side you want to leave your slack in. These are all kind of important considerations you kind of get used to over time. And another little lapse here. In all my attention to levels and squares, I neglected to measure accurately the distances of my legs and maintain parallelity. Is that a word? Parallelism. Parallelity. Anyway, it's a couple millimeters short. Rather embarrassingly, I actually considered whether to fix it or to distribute the area throughout the rest of the frame. Honestly, it's a no-brainer, but in the moment I considered cutting, remeasuring, re-welding, all of that to be a bit of a pain. One thing you'll notice about humans, of which I consider myself, is we tend to overvalue our mistakes and misgivings, undervalue our successes and rewards. It's biologically ingrained in us. Eons of evolution, unfortunately. So yeah, it took me the time to tack these slats a little tighter to get there, and some additional procrastination, but in the end I finally realized that, there's really only one correct thing to do in these situations, and it took all of no time to do it, and the rest of the build would be far better for it without having to readjust measurements and hide the crimes later on. It was an easy fix. Should have been a no-brainer. But of course, I have to have the obligatory final debate with myself. I have no idea what I'm doing here. I ended up not doing whatever it is. I think it was sort of an extra support and possibly something for the rotor wheel, if I get it in there. I don't know. So I think this is about 75% sped up. Probably could have done more, I guess. There's really no reason you watching all of this finagling, but my point is, in real time, just to correct this mistake took, less than 10 minutes. And these are the kinds of things you really learn to just swallow and do over. So these braces are going to do a couple of different things. First and foremost, keep the damn thing together. But they were apparently cut without enough tolerances, which you can see from how much it moves as you watch the leg here, and more so when I take the piece away. Also, my blade isn't really cutting the straightest, so off to the grinder. Ooh, this is actually going to eventually be a new project. I made this maybe a year ago, but I can do loads better once I get my lathe in. That might be towards the summer, so expect a video when I finally do. Also, I decided to go with these angle irons for a couple of reasons. One of them was waste. Tubes would have been just fine, but these are plenty strong and about half the material. It's not quite half the weight of the tubing since the wall thickness is different, but I don't know, it lightens it a bit and every little bit helps. I mean, a heavier table would have definitely been more stable, and there's going to be weight added to this once it's upright and in use, but then I intend to shift this around loads throughout its life, so for me personally, lighter will be a bit better on this project. So this is where I'm trying to fix the remaining slack from my not so squared legs. I'm using these side braces to cement the legs into a more square position, and to get them there, I've jerry-rigged the legs of my wooden workbench, clamping the top fixed and tightening the bottom closer and rechecking diagonals, parallels as I go. And once this is welded, it should just stay there. So I figure I have enough of the structure together now that I can weld the slats for good. I only need to do it at one side, so the other can stay double tacked, but here's where my welding actually bows the sides, and as I said before, I kind of fixed that in part 2 of this build, and I just thought this was cool. Yeah, that's me using my file as a hammer. Sorry about that. So since these wheels just get welded on, there's no point keeping the holes. And since they're all rectangulified, I figured I'd just cut them square and weld the feet directly. So that's what I did. And I had cigarettes. I'll be right back. Alrighty, so where was I? Oh right, the feet. Yeah, this is what I was talking about at the start. Not considering the front back thing. So the wheels of the brakes are supposed to go in the front. Without the brakes, it's supposed to go in the back. Dumb, I know. Not perfect, never claimed to be. Anyway, got it right in the end. And this one took far less time to fix. Right, so the second reason I chose angle iron for the rest of the frame is that it will become useful for me to pipe some wiring through the table for plugs and such. It'll allow some minor attachments should they need to be welded. I can do it from the back more cleanly without having to deal with through holes and the like. That'll make more sense in the second part of this build. But also these cross beams that I'm cutting. See, these become the support for a sheet metal shelf that I can use to keep cutoffs, scraps, odds and ends should I need them handy. And this T-bar fits perfectly nested inside them. So, by the way, these magnets, again, they're awesome. They can make like 16 different angles or some such. Of course, they always shouldn't be your main reference, but you know, double check. But for keeping things level, they are absolutely the tits. And the moment we've all been waiting for, the tip over. Yeah, this part is easy enough because it doesn't want to slip or slide or roll around anywhere, and it's not yet terribly heavy. See? Easy peasy. Yeah, but this part, I already know this part's going to be a problem. So I tried from the side with my foot on the wheel, but it's a no-go. I mean, I probably could have called someone. The girlfriend was upstairs. Probably could have given me a hand, but Penguin's not going to help. He's a bit of a dick, that Penguin. Trust me. Anyway, in the end, I managed with some fancy footwork and the obligatory manly grunting. Yeah. Always necessary, the grunting. It helps. And there's my wheelie bench. So, turned out fairly well. Pretty level, except for that slight bow in the middle, but like I said, I deal with that in the second part. This video took me way too long to make, if I'm being honest, and between my other job, restructuring the house, and the shop setup, I don't know. I'm thinking of maybe a Patreon account or something. We'll see. Anyway, let me know if you're interested in more. I have a ton of projects that I would love to do. I'm hoping to get some stuff on that, hasn't been done to death. This table was kind of an exception because I needed a table, but meanwhile, hope you enjoyed this one. Stay tuned for the rest. And thank you for joining me. Hope you've enjoyed. Toodles and ta-ta.